Good morning. Today, as we look at Luke 24, verses 1 through 35, we see the resurrection. We read about the resurrection according to Luke. The women come early on the first day of the week with the spices that they had prepared to anoint the body. And this was just a common practice that they all followed that way. When they got there, they found the stone rolled away. This is a story we know so well. The stone was rolled away, and they went in and didn't find the body. And it says, well, they were perplexed. I like that word, perplexed. It's kind of like when Mary was pondering all these things. They were perplexed. They were very puzzled. They were startled. They were surprised. You wonder what all went through their minds, I mean, I'm sure that, it was just an amazing experience for them. But while they were still there, these women, doesn't say, right here, doesn't tell us how many, but Luke will tell us, he'll list some names in just a couple of verses. But it says, 2 men in dazzling clothes stood there. They were terrified, bowed their heads, and these men asked, why do you look for the living among the dead? When we go to visit somebody, we go to their house, we go to their place of work, we go to where they are. I mean, and granted, we go to the cemeteries to pay respects to those who have died and everything that way, especially the end of this month with Memorial Day. That's something that, we'll be thinking about. But, we don't go to the cemetery looking for someone who is alive. And so this question, why do you look for the living among the dead, would be another one of those things for the women to be perplexed about. And they said, he's not here, he's risen. Remember how he told you? The angels are saying, don't you remember? Think about now what Jesus said. And hear these words in a new light. Jesus had told them, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be betrayed, I'm going to die, and I'm going to rise again. And they could never get that rise again to full comprehension, because it just, wasn't realistic to them. But when these angels said that, it says these women remembered. And then they returned from the tomb and told this to the 11 and to all the rest. And again, I know I've said before, but it wasn't just the 11 disciples that were there. There were more, and it was these women as well. I mean, Jesus had more followers than just the disciples. And so they list, Luke lists Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women who were with them, told this to the apostles. So, it wasn't just the other woman, so there were several of these women that went to address Jesus' body and the proper anointing of it. And it says, Luke says, these words seemed like an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up, went to the tomb, ran to the tomb, stooped inside, saw the linen clothes, then he went home, amazed at what happened. And I think that is so telling that he went home. He didn't go back to the group, but he went home. And so did Peter go home then to think and to ponder and to take in all of what the women had told him, and then the reminder that the angels had told the women, remember what Jesus said? These women told these disciples and all of Jesus' followers, the angels' words. Don't you remember what he said? And what a glimpse of hope that they would have for them. And then we go on to the story of the 2 disciples walking on the road to Emmaus, Cleopas and his companion. And I remember looking different times to see if anybody can specifically say who this other companion was. And I remember one time I found it says that it was Peter, because in Luke, verse 24 of what we read today, when Cleopas and his companion get back to the other disciples, they say to him, the Lord has appeared to Peter. Well, how would they know, these other disciples, how would they know that he had appeared to Peter if Cleopas and if it was Peter, just got back? They wouldn't. So I kind of discount that. It wasn't Peter, I don't think. It could have been Cleopas's wife. Could have been anybody. We don't know that. But these 2 were walking along the road They had heard the story from the women. They had been there with the disciples, with the followers of Jesus, and heard the women because they were talking about it when Jesus came and asked them, "What are you talking about?" And then they answered Jesus, or Cleopas answered Jesus. And this is when we hear the one name. He answered Jesus, are you the only one that doesn't know? I mean, he answers Jesus' question with a question. How good deal. But then Jesus says, what things? So these disciples, Cleopas and the companion, tell Jesus about all that had happened. And one of the favorite lines in here is in verse 27. They say, but we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. And I know I've talked about Christian hope before, and I'm going to say it again. Christian hope is a confident expectation that something will happen. It isn't just a wishy-washy, something, but it's a confident expectation. When we have hope in Jesus Christ, when we have hope in the forgiveness of sins, when we have hope of the resurrection to new life, it is a confident expectation. And that was, these disciples had that confident expectation that Jesus was going to establish this new kingdom on earth, that he was and is the Messiah. But they didn't understand what it meant for Jesus to be the Messiah. And so they told Jesus all about himself. And then they said, besides all this, it's the third day now, and some women came and told us what happened at the tomb. They didn't find his body. They saw a vision of angels that said he was raised, And then it says, verse 24 says, some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it as women said, but they did not see him. I mean, earlier Luke had just said that Peter went home. And here Cleopas and his companion tell Jesus that some of those went, And I'm saying that this must be more than just the women, because it's after they've said that the women went and came back with a report. And some of these details may not seem important, but when I look at it, there's so much rich stuff here to think about and to pay attention to that, but these two told Jesus that some of those with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but they didn't see him. They didn't see Jesus. They didn't see the angels. They didn't see anybody. And then Jesus says to them, oh, how foolish you are and how slow to believe all that the prophets have declared. And then Jesus goes on to explain to them, beginning with Moses, the lawgiver, way, way, way back in Jewish history, of the Messiah and the suffering that he would go through. And Jesus told them all. He says he interpreted to them the things about himself in all of the scriptures. And then when they get to Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem, they're going to go into town, off the main road and to their home. And Jesus makes it look like he's going on. They invite him to come to spend the night with them as it's getting late in the day. Come spend the night. These roads aren't safe, especially for single travelers at night. So Jesus accepts their invitation. He comes to their house. And think about that. We can walk the walk with Jesus, and we can invite Jesus into our lives, and hopefully we do. These two disciples didn't know who Jesus was on the road, but they invited him into their homes. They invited him to spend more time with them. And hopefully we do the same thing, that we invite Jesus to spend time with us, and we invite ourselves to spend time with Jesus. But they invited Jesus to come in and stay the evening, for the day is now nearly over, it says, And he goes in, and as they're eating, he takes the bread. I mean, this isn't the visitor's task to take the bread and to give thanks. This would be the host, the householder, the house owner that would do this. But rather Jesus takes the bread and blesses it, breaks it, and it is then that these two recognize Jesus. And it's in the breaking of the bread, the drinking of the wine, that we too have a better understanding and a better recognition of Jesus. And it's, you know, it's in that time when we hear those words, "This is my body given for you, this is my blood shed for you," that Jesus becomes more real to us. And I remember watching a first confirmation video years ago, and it's still out. I have a copy of it yet, but the pastor asks one of these youth as to, you know, what happens in Holy Communion, and this little boy says, "It's Jesus' body and Jesus' blood, and then when I eat it, it becomes a part of me." You know, what a tremendous statement of faith. You know, Jesus' body becomes a part of us. But it was in that breaking of the bread, after they had invited Jesus into their home, that they recognized the Lord and Savior. And then they get up and they run back to Jerusalem, that 7-mile journey they had just made. And they go to tell the disciples who were still gathered. He says they found the 11 and their companions gathered, and they were saying, these 11 and their disciples were saying, "The Lord has risen and he has appeared to Simon." And then these two, Cleopas and his companion, share with them all that happened on the road and how Jesus had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. So it's, you know, and I think about, why doesn't Luke say anything more about Peter's seeing Jesus? I mean, I would think that would be a monumental experience, something that Luke would want to highlight for us, because, you know, Peter, this bold and brash one who was one of the forefront leaders of the group, and continued to be so. I mean, he continued his ministry. He continued following and preaching and teaching. But Luke just says, all he says is that, you know, the Lord has appeared to Simon. You know, and it just, I mean, I would, you know, it would just be nice to know a little bit more. But what the Bible tells us is enough. What the Bible tells us is enough. May God bless you on your journey today.